Hello, and welcome to a webinar about improving the way you communicate. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. Beautiful. So today we're going to talk about how you might be able to improve communication and the success you have with that just by changing a few things about the language you use. I am Dr. Jane Jenkins. I'm a licensed psychologist in Washington State, Idaho, and Michigan. And I'm licensed to do teletherapy in about 40 states at this point. I worked in a veterinary teaching hospital for 5 years until just recently. I decided to build up my private practice a little bit more, so I went full-time in that. I've also been a facilitator with VMHS since about 2021. So I hope that I have a pretty good feel for what you all go through in vet med and how I might be able to be helpful. This is my little family. I have three rescue horses, all with different varying stories, and a little dog family as well. So, what I'm hoping is that I can show you how this will be worth your time. We're going to use validation in the domain of communication to improve interactions that you have. I always like to talk about what might be happening in the brain. We'll talk a little bit about the role of empathy. We're going to do a little practice. We'll talk about some myths and misconceptions about using validation language. I will show you the four-step validation method and we'll do a little more practice. And then I will, of course, provide you with some resources at the end. Being listened to and being heard is one of the greatest desires of the human heart. So true. We not only need to be listened to, but we really need to feel like we're being heard. There's another saying that I was tempted to put in this PowerPoint. The louder you talk, the less I can hear you. When people tend to talk louder, we don't hear them. We kind of shut them out. So I think that's important to take forward. If a person doesn't hear you, then you can't communicate. So I hope that this will help you be able to calm and maybe sometimes eliminate concerns and fears that other people might have, um, avoid or resolve arguments a little more effectively, give instruction and advice that actually does stick, be able to provide support, even if you don't agree with the person or know how to help them. Boost others' excitement and happiness while also increasing comfort that they are confiding in you and more easily show that you understand and have compassion in maybe your intimate relationships. And all that kind of equals becoming an all around more likable human. So, what is validation in the domain of communication? It is pretty simple on the face of it. It's showing interest in and affirming the worth of someone else, their comments, their requests, or their emotions. It is non-judgmental, no exceptions to that. We're never judging. That would take all the meaning away from validation. So we don't judge. There's interesting research done by John Gottman. John and Julie Gottman are kind of the experts, known experts in couple therapy. And there is a strong relationship when we turn towards someone, so we positively engage versus turning away, which is kind of a negative passive response. And the Gottmans can actually predict the success of relationships based on statistics related to turning toward and turning away. So we're going to work really hard today to be turning toward. It works also in any relationship. To become a great listener, you actually have to become a great validator. So it's good practice. So if we look at some validating versus invalidating statements, a validating response is any response that shows the other person you recognize and accept their emotions. It refers to a specific emotion, where invalidating kind of does that. It just takes the value away from what the person said. It discounts what they said. So you can see here, if we pull out just a few examples, let's see. We could say, oh, that's so sad. And that actually validates how the person's feeling versus just put a smile on your face and tough it out. That's kind of going to add more stress, right? It's not going to help the person. So, what is going on in the brain when we feel understood versus not understood? So, if we feel validated, understood by someone, the areas associated with reward and social connection become very active. It also predicted increased interpersonal closeness, which sounds like very good. When we're feeling misunderstood or not understood, the areas associated with negative affect and social pain light up. Rejection and sensitive individuals in this study felt even less understood. Um, I'm sorry, when they felt less understood, they had amplified neural responses in negative affect brain areas. So it even ramps it up more when we are rejection sensitive. And then it predicted feeling socially distant from others, which disconnection is not what we want. We want connection. So anger and frustration uses a top-down approach to set off the fight or flight response. Fight or flight usually is a bottom-up response. The brainstem is kind of our original warning sign that then activates, oh, I need to fight, flee, or freeze. It uses the prefrontal cortex instead. So when we feel anger and frustration, we use the prefrontal cortex down, and it's a perception instead of a sensation that would otherwise come from the brainstem. So it is contextual. So it's related to information we already know or we've experienced at some point that create this top-down perception. And it still makes stress hormones go up. It makes us frustrated, disappointed, and it's a negative reaction. So, what gets in the way of listening or being heard? Frustration, right? The amygdala is going to hijack the brain because the top-down system is going to say, hey, I'm perceiving there's a problem here. So, frustration goes up, stress goes up. We start listening to respond rather than focusing on understanding because now we're focusing on protecting ourselves. Not giving your full attention is going to get in the way. Impatience, difficulty waiting to make your counterpoint, like actually waiting for that opening is disruptive, it's distracting, and it's not validating. Or talking and raising your voice only for catharsis, only to release your own emotional pressure, that's definitely going to get in the way. So listening and validating. When we listen to understand instead of listening to respond, we make other humans feel heard and understood. We need that. We also need to feel accepted and appreciated, which comes with that. So good listeners listen and they validate other people with empathy, curiosity, and without judgment. So what validating someone's experience looks like is identify a specific emotion that you pick up from what they're saying. You offer some justification or understanding for how that person is feeling in that moment. When we do it, if they're sharing something, an experience, an emotion, a concern, they are probably looking for validation. And it feels like, I hear you, I get what you're feeling, and it's perfectly all right to feel that way. And just a caveat, this is not a time to fix, advise, correct. All we're doing is validating. It'll seem counterintuitive if you're a fixer by nature, but this will actually set you up for the other stuff later. So, how does empathy come into this? Empathy is when we can put ourselves in someone else's shoes. So, we're actually able to step into their experience and kind of feel it with them. And we could generate this by considering a few things. We want to look at them and make eye contact. When you make eye contact with someone, you see them on a deeper level. Is their life actually harder than you know? Can you put yourself in their shoes, look them in the eye, and feel what they're feeling? Imagine them as a child if you need to. You're talking to a 4-year-old. That's going to actually help you generate empathy. Learn to identify your own emotions. Like, what are you feeling in that moment? Are you self-aware? And that will help you actually get better identifying emotions in others. If you can name it, you can tame it. My friend, I wanted to call her by her first name, Dr. Wise, says this all the time. And it's so true. Get curious. How would you feel if you had the same thing happening to you? And then don't judge your own emotions. Practice recognizing them on a regular basis, accepting them, validate your own emotions because they are just what they are. They're organic and free flowing, and we don't get to not feel them. It's just whether you actually want to recognize them or not. This will help you build empathy for other people while also building compassion for yourself. So let's give it a little try. So a coworker says, I'm never going to learn to do this procedure correctly. That's my best frustrated response. So what would you say? Think about it a little bit. So maybe you say, oh, that's not true. Of course you will. That's not a terrible response, right? But it won't make them feel any better. And it is invalidating. So let's try again. The coworker says the same thing. I'm never going to learn to do this procedure correctly. What else could you say? Maybe you would say, what? What makes you say that? Curiosity and empathy leads to some insight about why the coworker is feeling insecure, and it will give them room to elaborate and share. And it's so much more helpful. So the coworker says, I see all the skilled people here getting it so much faster than I do. I'm nowhere as talented as they are. Here's your opportunity. You can say, there are a lot of talented people here. I get that you're frustrated. It's hard not to compare yourself to others. We haven't fixed it, we haven't judged it. All we've done is acknowledged how that person feels. That's validating. So, some myths and misconceptions about validation language that it's only for negative emotions. Not true. It increases satisfaction, trust, commitment, connection, regardless of the emotions. You can actually help them savor and extend a positive emotion if you validate that. Number two, you can't validate if you don't agree. That's not true either. You're not saying you agree. You're saying you understand their perspective, their experience, and how they feel. Just make sure that you do. And if you don't, get some clarifying information so that you do. Validation is simply repeating what they said. Not true. That would be reflective listening. So, validation language focuses on the emotion of the person and connecting with what they're sharing. Instead of looking at, you're looking with, if that makes sense. So, let's talk a little bit about what the heck even is the 4-step validation method. So, number one, we're going to listen empathically, or you can say empathetically, it's the same word. You're going to validate the emotion. You're going to offer advice or encouragement only if appropriate. And so we want to be really careful with this one. And then if it feels appropriate, we're going to validate the emotion again. Most of the time, you're going to do 1 and 2, and 3 and 4 will depend on the context. So let's take a look. When we listen empathically, we listen to what people are saying, actually listening to their words. Then we're going to look beyond the words to identify, what emotions are popping up? What are you sensing from them? What emotions do you see? Are they angry? Are they hurt? Are they excited? How would I feel? And then we're going to get curious, show interest in what they're saying. And if you weren't quite sure how they were feeling, or if you're not quite sure about the story, ask some questions. Like, was that last week? Then what did you do? You seem worried. Is that right? and make sure you give your absolute full attention. If you cannot, just reschedule. If you're going to be distracted, that's going to be invalidating. It's going to ruin everything you're trying to do. So make sure you can give your full attention. And when you do meet up, give your full attention. Next, we're going to invite them to open up. If you think they may want to, you can simply throw something out there like, "Oh, you seem upset. What's up?" Or, "Do you want to talk about it?" Be observant. So up to 70% of communication is nonverbal. So look at tone, look at body language. Are they talking really fast? Are they shaking? You can get a lot from their body language. And then match their energy. If they're happy, you can smile. If they're feeling sad, then you're going to use a soft, low tone. And then we're going to offer micro validations. So instead of going for the big fix or the big validation, we're just going to say things like, "Oh, no way," or "I feel that way too." And then finally, don't try to fix it. Avoid words like "at least," "you should," "that's not true." That is actually counter. So make sure that that doesn't happen. Number two, we're going to validate the emotion. So give worth to the person's comments or emotions. Validate even if you disagree. Remember, you don't have to agree. It is very advantageous and possible to validate someone's experience even if you don't agree with them. The result of that is they're going to become much more likely to hear a differing opinion or to hear a different perspective or to take advice. If you're not sure how the person is feeling, go ahead and ask them, like, "How are you feeling about all this? How is this affecting you?" Just to clarify. If you can relate, let them know. Say something like, "I can relate," or "I had a similar experience." We don't want to say things like, "I know exactly how you feel," because that tends to turn the focus on you. And all of a sudden, you're telling your story, right? And we don't want to do that to them. There will be time for your story, but this isn't the time. If you can't relate, let them know. Just acknowledge maybe you've never been in their shoes and you don't know exactly how they feel, but you're understanding how they feel, like you're trying to, and then tell the truth. Resist the urge to lie to make them feel better, like, "Oh, it'll all be okay." Don't say that if you don't know that, right? Acknowledge the truth, validate their emotion, and provide comfort for them. Those are our goals. And then number three, offer advice or encouragement only if appropriate. Determine what they're looking for. Do they want feedback? Do they want advice? Do they want nothing? Some people just want to be heard, and provide that. So feedback and advice are optional. Determine whether they're open to hearing it. Many day-to-day interactions don't require this. You don't have to do it. Avoid giving unsolicited feedback. In vet med, sometimes the problem is A, we want to do B to fix B. And this is not a situation like that. If they don't invite you to do so, then they don't want it. Sharing with you does not mean they're looking for your advice or input. You could say, "How can I help?" Or, "I have a few thoughts. May I share that?" If they say no, then it's no, and we leave it at that. If you do give feedback, lead it with a validating statement, right? So it reminds them that you've heard them and you're connected with their experience, and then you give the feedback. Always use "and" instead of "but," so you don't cancel out the validation when you do this. Um, when we use "but" in the middle of a sentence, it kind of cancels out the first half of the sentence. So use "and" even if it feels awkward, because it will connect the validation part of the statement and your feedback if they invited that. And then lead with "I" instead of "you." When we lead with "I," it reminds that we're sharing our perspective or opinion, and it reduces the likelihood that they'll become defensive. Like, what I might be thinking about is la, 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 right? And then avoid absolute traps. So this is particularly important during feedback. Don't use words like always or never. Use words that are a little softer, like often and rarely, because that increases flexibility and ways to pivot out of those words. And then the last step, if it's appropriate, is to validate again. It is very good practice to end the conversation with one final validating statement because that's what they wanted all along. It's more important, particularly important, if the feedback that you gave them was difficult, and it reinforces the fact that you did hear them and understand them. And then validate the vulnerability that they provided or offered. Sharing personal things can be really uncomfortable, and they're trusting you with that information. So thank them for opening up to you and validate that it was really, it was really difficult for them. They have taken a huge emotional risk. So we want to handle that with great care. So let's practice again. Here's an example of what not to do. So a coworker goes into your office and expresses concern that someone you put in charge of some tasks is underqualified and might produce work inconsistent with the standard of the company. You try to jump in and assure them you have it handled, but they don't seem to hear you. They continue talking and then they express concern about your experience and ability. You become defensive, list all the reasons you're qualified to handle the situation, and now you and this person are talking in circles because you're both defensive. No validation language occurred. Resentment probably has also built up. So, what went wrong? They tried to fix the situation by explaining their sides, your side and their side, before they validated the person that had the concern. So, that person isn't hearing you because you aren't hearing them. So, how might we do it better? This time, you're going to listen closer to what they're saying so that you can understand what they're feeling apart from the situation. You realize from the limited information that they have that they probably do have some reason for concern. So you say, I can absolutely see why you're concerned. Without all the details, you just see this person suddenly working on projects they don't seem qualified for. I would be concerned too if I were in your shoes. We validated, we understand. I appreciate you looking out for the quality and bringing this up, as I know these kinds of talks aren't easy to have. You just appreciated their vulnerability. The tension is way lower now. The person is now kind of more open to your perspective. And then you can explain the person might not be the very best fit, and they're qualified enough for the tasks you will be monitoring very closely. Whole different outcome, right? The person leaves the room feeling heard and also reassured, though you never said you agreed with them. So validate, recognize the emotion, give feedback if appropriate, and then revalidate, and you have protected the connection that you want to maintain. So some final thoughts. Validation language is helpful and it protects relationships. So ask validation when you need it. Humans are not mind readers, so nobody's going to guess you need to talk about something. You might have to bring it up, and you can say, and I have to do this sometimes with my person, I need to get something off my chest. I just want you to listen. I don't need you to fix it. And then learn to validate yourself. Try not to minimize or ignore your own emotions. They're very important. Focus instead on acknowledging and accepting them. And then you can actually generate your own self-compassion. That's validation language. Wow, that's really hard for me. I really tried to work on that and it's not working out. Nobody's really getting it. That can really help you. It promotes strong emotional health and you will be more content overall. We spend lots of our lives just beating up on ourselves and it does no good, zero good at all. And then watch your expectations. You might do all the steps perfectly, and the other person may still not be receptive, and that's okay. You can always validate, and you can't always guarantee they will accept it or react how you hope they will because you really can never, you don't know what space they're in, right? So do your best and see how it goes. Here are some resources for you. The brain graphic is from the article that I listed on the left. Most of this information is from Michael Sorensen's book, I Hear You, incredible book about how to make communication super easy. And then, of course, Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. If you'd like additional information about support that NAMVI's VMHS can offer, please contact Dr. Lawler at klawler@namvi.org. You can also see additional webinars on our YouTube channel, so check that out. And I hope that I see you again. Thanks so much. Mhm.